router 7, router 8, and router 9. Let me to configure here. Look at here. First, R7. This is the first router. EN, again conf T, host name is the router 7, host name R7. We have two interface ETH00. This is the first interface, okay? The IP address of this interface is 192.168.1, or for example 7, because this is residing on the router 7. Look at here in the router of 1 and 2 and 3. Look at here in router 1, I use 192.168.1.1. In router 2, I used 192.168.2.1 because this is residing on router 2. Let me to use the 2.2. Okay, and about the router 3, I'm using the 192.168.3.3. It's better. After that, in router 7, we can use 192.168.1.7/24 on the ETH00, then no shutdown, IP OSPF1 area 0, IP OSPF network point. Also, we have one loopback interface here. Interface, for example, loopback 0. Okay, the IP address of this loopback is 192.168.2.547 quad 255. No shutdown, we don't need no shutdown. IP OSPF1 area 0, it's sufficient. Then router OSPF1, router ID is quad 7. Default information origin always is not needed. That's it. This is the configuration of R7, ETH00, and loopback 0, and then OSPF. Okay, let me to copy this configuration for the router 8 and also router 9. This is the configuration of R8, this router. Host name is R8, interface ETH00's IP address is 192.168.2.8, 255.255.2.550. No shutdown, IP OSPF1 area 0, IP OSPF network point. Then interface loopback 0, the IP address is 192.168.2.548, quad 255. And after that, router OSPF1, router ID is quad 8. Then router 9 configuration. The host name is R9, okay? Also, we need ETH00. The IP address of this ETH00 is 192.168.3.9, 255.255.2.550. No shutdown, IP OSPF1 area 0, IP OSPF network point. Interface loopback 0's IP address is 192.168.2.549, quad 255, IP OSPF1 area 0. Router OSPF1, router ID is quad 9. That's it. Let me to copy this configuration. First, R9, this is the configuration of the R9, and pasting on the R9 CLI, the first router. After that, we can copy the configuration of R8, and then pasting on the R8 CLI. This is the R8 CLI. Let me to copy this configuration here. After that, we need to copy the configuration of R7, copy, and then pasting on the R7 CLI. Also, we configured R1, R2, and R3. This is a configuration of R3. Only I'm going to configure this part. Okay, copy the configuration of R3 and pasting on the R3 CLI conf T. This is the new configuration. Also, about the router 2, again, we have the same condition, copy, and in R2 CLI, this is the R2 CLI conf T, and pasting here. And the last router is router 1. Okay, this is the router 1. Copy the configuration, new part of configuration, and pasting on the R1 CLI conf T, paste it here. That's it. Now we can check the OSPF neighborship between the router 1 and router 7, and router 2 and router 8, and router 3 and router 9. Also, we expect to see the loopback IP addresses of the R7, R8, and R9 in the router 1, router 2, and router 3, okay, respectively. And also, we will see one default route in the R7, R8, and R9. Let me, starting from the R7, in R7, show IP route. Okay, show IP route OSPF can show us that we learn one default route from the OSPF from the router 1. It's okay. In router 8, let me to show you show IP route. Here we have show IP route, for example, OSPF. Again, we receive one default route from the OSPF. It's okay. And then in router 9, show IP route, OSPF can show us that we learn one default route from the OSPF. It's okay. Now in R1, if you check the show IP route OSPF, you will see that we learn 192.168.2.547 from the router 1. It's okay. After that, show IP route OSPF in router 2 can show us that we learn 192.168.2.548 from the router 2. And finally, in router 3, show IP route OSPF can show us that we learn 192.168.2.549. Now we can, from R1 and R2 and R3, advertise these addresses to the router 4 as the mapping server. Because of that, we need to configure the Lisp features, ITR, XTR, and also mapping server and mapping resolver. Okay, let me to configure first R1, R2, and R3. After that, we can configure the router 4. You know that R1 is the ITR and also XTR. R2 also is ITR and XTR, and also R3 is an ITR and also XTR. But R4 is the mapping server and also mapping resolver. We can start the configuration from the router 1. You know that for configuration, we need the router Lisp command. This is the first command. After that, we can use IPv4 ITR and also IPv4 ETR. This means that this router is the IPv4 ingress tunnel router and also IPv4 egress tunnel router. The next things that we should configure is the IPv4 ITR. You know that ITR should use the map resolver or MR. Because of that, we need to give the map resolver IP address to the router 1, IPv4 ITR map resolver. Okay, the IP of the map resolver is quad 4. That's it. And after that, we need to give the IP address of the map server to the ETR. Because of that, we need to configure IPv4 ETR, then map server. Here we have the same IP address, for example, quad 4. And also, you know that for authentication between the ETR and also mapping server mapping, we need to configure a key. We can use the key, for example, Cisco. That's it. This is the configuration of ITR and also ETR. Also, you know that we need to advertise the addresses of the Lisp site, the EIDs, to the router 4. Because of that, we need to use database mapping command. Database mapping. After this, you can use the EID address space to advertise to the router 4. For example, the first EID is 192.168.10/24. Then you need to use the rlook, as you learned before. The rlook is quad 1 in the router 1. After that, we can configure the priority and also wait. Priority 1, for example, wait is 100. Okay, this is the configuration of database mapping. Here also I'm going to configure another database mapping statement for the loopback 0 of router 7 192.168.2.547/32 with the same rlook with the priority of 1 and also weight of 100. This is the configuration of the router Lisp in the router 1. Let me to copy this configuration and paste it on the router 2 and also on router 3. After that, we can change, we can modify some part of the configuration. In router 2, we have router Lisp, IPv4 ITR, IPv4 ETR, IPv4 ITR map resolver quad 4, and finally IPv4 ETR map server quad 4 key Cisco. It's okay. But about the database mapping, we need to change to modify the database mapping command. Database mapping 192.168.2.0/24. The routing locator is quad 2 with the priority of 1 and weight of 100. Then database mapping 192.168.2.548, for example, quad 1, priority 1, weight of 100. And after that, we can configure the router 3. In router 3, we have router Lisp, IPv4 ITR, IPv4 ETR, IPv4 ITR map resolver quad 4, IPv4 ETR map server quad 4 key Cisco, and then database mapping 192.168, okay, 30/24. The routing locator address is quad 3 with the priority of 1 and weight of 100. And finally, database mapping 192.168.2.549, for example, /32 quad 1. should change to modify to quad 3, then priority 1, then wait 100. And finally, we need to configure the router 4. You know that router 4 is the mapping server. Let me to configure and also mapping resolver, the router 4. Look at here. This is the router 4 configuration about the router Lisp. You know that here we need to configure first IPv4 map server, because this is the MS, and also IPv4 map resolver, IPv4 map resolver. That's it.